Okay, so I talked a little bit about docking um, your Xcode into your dock. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to remove this from the dock first, so I can show you how to put it onto your dock. So I'm going to remove that from the dock. So you go into Applications, and then you find Xcode, and what you do is you simply just put that straight into your dock. Now you've docked Xcode and you're able to access Xcode without having to open up your Finder window. What we're going to do now is we're going to double click on Xcode. I want you guys to also see that I'm using version 6.2. This is the version that you should be using. So we're going to create a new project. So you want to hit that. As I mentioned, you're going to make sure that it says iOS application. We're going to go into single view application and hit next. And then I'm going to name mine example. And everything else, make sure you have an organization name, organization identifier. You want to make sure the language is Objective-C, and then devices iPhone. Then you're going to hit next. And it's going to prompt you to where you want to save your project. Mine defaults to save your project on the desktop, which is completely fine with me, so I'm going to hit create. And then now I'm in my Xcode workspace. So my project has been created, it's been saved on my desktop, and now I can see my project workspace. So once again, this is the navigator area, this is the editor area, and then this is the utility area, and then the top here is your toolbar. And then what you want to do first is you want to hit the file main.storyboard. As I talked about, this is the main file where you will be doing most of your prototyping, or if not all of your prototyping. So I'm going to hit main.storyboard. And then you'll notice that the view controller is rather big. So we're going to have to make adjustments to the view controller. So we want to select the view controller. We select the view controller, we make sure that it's outlined in blue, and then we're going to go here into the attributes inspector. So if you see here, that's the attributes inspector. If you highlight any of these icons, you'll be able to see that where you are in the inspector area. So we're interested in being in the attributes inspector. We're going to change the size to iPhone 4, and you notice that my view controller has now been resized. Now we're going to add another view controller into the storyboard. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to actually collapse this here. I'm going to collapse this part. This is called the document outline. I'm going to collapse it by pressing this button here on the bottom left of the storyboard screen. Now I have more real estate to work with in my storyboard. So the next thing we're going to do is add a view controller into the storyboard. And you want to make sure that you're in the object library. And so how do we know that? This icon is highlighted in blue. So we're going to put another view controller in there. And anytime you want to move anything around, simply select that UI element and you can move it around, or that view controller. Now we need to resize this view controller, and I just went through those steps, but we're going to do it again. We're going to select the view controller. We're going to go into the attributes inspector and hit iPhone 4 again. And then we can kind of make some adjustments. We can move it. We can make more room on the screen here. Okay, now we're going to do something called embed a navigation controller, and you embed the navigation controller into the first view controller, or we can call that the initial view controller. How do we know it's the initial view controller? There's an arrow here pointing, indicating that that is the initial view controller on your storyboard. So we want to make sure it's selected first. We go into Editor, Embed In, and then we go to Navigation Controller. Okay. Now notice the navigation controller also needs to be resized. Well, here it's already selected, so I don't need to select it again. I'm in my attributes inspector. Now I go to iPhone 4. And now it's been resized. But if you noticed, I can't see my other view controller. So what you want to do is double click on the storyboard. So you can zoom in and zoom out by double clicking on the storyboard. So I'll do that again. Double click, zoom in, zoom out. So I'm going to click on the navigation controller, move that here. I'm going to move the other view controller, and then you can kind of scroll to find the other one. Now everything's in view, and then I can zoom in. So oftentimes you're going to have to zoom in and zoom out of storyboard to find all your view controllers. Another thing that you can do is you can actually collapse the navigator panel. So you can collapse anything to make more room. So I've just collapsed the navigator area, so now I have more room here. If I need more room, I can collapse the other panel. If I need to access the inspector area, then I can, or the utility area, I can once again make it appear, pressing. So these buttons are really key here. Make sure you're well acquainted with that. Okay, so we're once again preparing to prototype. So we got all of that. I'm prepared with Melissa's wireframe app flow. I have that on hand. I've prepared my images, and so now I want to add the images. So let's go into, let me just make sure I know where those images are. Okay, I think they're here in the walking tour folder. Great. So I prepared my images to add into my project. So I go into File, Add Files to Example. And then now I need to navigate and find those files. So that was in my, it's on my desktop and it's in the walking tour folder. And then I've already kind of named them according to plan. So walking tour 1 and 11. So that's how they appear sequentially in Melissa's app flow. So you can select the first one, hit shift, and then select all of them. You want to make sure that destination, copy items if needed. You want to make sure that box is checked. Everything looks good. You want to add that to my project. Now if I open up the navigator area, I can see that all these images now have been added to my example folder. So they've been added to my example project folder. Okay? Now remember that images are inserted into a UI image view. Okay? So what I'm going to do now is I have to, and then you can type down here actually. I'm looking for the image view. There, so it automatically popped up. We are now going to drag and drop an image view onto the first view controller so that we can insert the walking tour home screen image into that image view. So the first step is to drag and drop the image view, and then you can kind of make adjustments. Right? So you want to square that off in the view controller. Right? You want, in order to insert an image into the image view, it needs to be selected. Okay? And then what we're going to do is we're going to select the first image of Melissa's app flow into this first view controller. So here, and we're going to select WT-1, and voila, that image is inserted into the view controller. What we're going to do now is we're going to start the initial steps to connect these two view controllers together. How we do that is we need a button. So what we're going to do is drag and drop the button right over view controller there. Okay. Now, we don't want to leave the word button there. We want to delete that word. So first we want to select the button, and that's how we know it's selected, with the white squares appear outside the borders there. We're in the attributes inspector of the button, and then what we want to do is delete the word button. And then let's go back to our storyboard, and now we notice the button didn't disappear, it's just the text. It's just the text. Okay? Now what we want to do is we want to center our cursor on that button. So we want to select the button, center our cursor, hit Control, keep Control pressed, Control drag to the view controller you desire. Take your hand off Control, and then this black dialog box will come up, and you want to select Show. And you see that the segue has been made. Okay, now let's check to make sure that that was made. Oh, and then I also mentioned that you want to make sure the active scheme is set to iPhone 5. So how did I do that? Here's the active scheme. Okay, select iPhone 5, and now iPhone 5 has been selected. Now what we're doing here is we're going to run the iOS simulator, and we're going to see indeed has the connection been made, and what does our prototype look like as of right now. So hit run. So it's compiling all the files. And notice that your iOS simulator icon will show up in your dock. Okay, so here's our home screen. If I press here on the invisible button above our walking tour, it will push out to the second view controller. Okay? So remember that before you hit Command Q to quit the simulator, you want to make sure the iOS simulator is selected. And how do you know that? Because iOS simulator shows up here on the top left-hand corner of your screen. So now I can hit Command Q. I'm back in my Xcode project. We've just ran the simulator to make sure that everything works. So what I'm going to do is walk you through setting up a second image. So we need to, of course, look for image view, and we can type that on the bottom. We can add that in here. Good. Now I'm going to place the second image in there. All right, there we go. Okay. Now we want to make sure that everything runs, everything looks good. This time let's hit Command R. Okay, so we hit walking tour and it pushes out to the second screen. So what I'm gonna do now, I think you guys are getting the hang of this, but let's add in one more view controller. Okay, so we're gonna add in one more view controller. Remember that we need to resize that view controller. Okay, so select, resize that view controller. Great. Now right now it's not connected. It's not connected to the second view controller. So what do we have to do? We want to insert a button so that we can connect it. So let's go insert a button, site 1. What we want to do, we can actually enlarge that button to fill the entire graphic on this screen. So you just click on the edges here. And then of course we don't want to leave that text there. So in the attributes inspector, we're in the button. We want to make sure we erase that text. Remember that the button's still there, it's just the text has disappeared. So what we want to do is we want to hit Control, drag, and we want to show. Okay, now that connection's been made. How do we know that? Let's run it in the simulator. It's always good to check. Hit walking tour, and then if we hit site 1, we go to that third view controller, which is still blank. Okay, so make sure you're in the iOS simulator, hit Command Q, and now what we're going to do is we're going to throw in our third image of our prototype. So we go to image view, because you always need to have an image view first before you're able to put an image onto your view controller. So we're going to throw an image view on there. Okay, and we are going to look for the third one, and then everything is there. Okay, so actually in the app flow, what I go to first is the site start. So what I have to do here is take that button and move it here. So now that if you press site starts, it goes to the third screen that makes sense, because this is the site starts, and that's probably where you're going to get the information. All right, so let's run the application. So we hit walking tour, and then we hit site starts. And this is the beginnings of the prototype. So basically it's the same steps, so I'm not going to run through the entire app flow, which is, in Melissa's case, it's about 12 screens. And basically this is how you're going to be prototyping your project 3. You're going to be doing the entire app flow, and then you're also going to be prototyping that app flow using Xcode. So once again, in your meeting with me, week 13, I want to make sure that you guys know how to do this prototyping process, and then we'll talk about any other questions that you have about the class, about project number 3, which is going to be your final project for the class. But I hope you guys find prototyping with Xcode really fun and exciting. Feel free to practice with your local app flow designs in the meantime. Have a great week, and I will see you soon. Aloha.